Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Lesson 8 in the Unburdened series. We're glad that you made it here with us this morning. Today's lesson is entitled The Burden of Hopelessness. The Burden of Hopelessness. Now, I want to begin by helping us to get a feel for hopelessness. I have a couple of illustrations, but I want to let you know up front that it is really difficult to describe an inside hurt, an inside pain. And in no way do we want to take hopelessness lightly. It's almost like that if you've never been there and felt hopelessness for real, that you really can't understand. So those of you who are shoulder deep in the quicksand of hopelessness, please forgive my feeble attempts at this. And to those of you who have never felt the burden of hopelessness, know that it's probably 100-fold what I'm about to describe to you. 100-fold in the mere because of the mere words that I can use to describe. Hopelessness takes hold. Hopelessness suffocates. Hopelessness takes hold of situations. And some situations are oriented around our own sin, where we've made bad choice after bad choice. Some situations are through no fault of our own, but maybe the sin of another, like the sin of abuse. Some situations where hopelessness wraps its fingers around are from things that just happen, from tornadoes, from natural disasters, just happenings. Hopelessness also suffocates, so that nearly all of our energy is expended toward this situation or this event, so that nearly all of our thoughts, either while we're awake or even while we're asleep, that all of our thoughts are focused on the horrible event that has happened or is still happening. So at this point, I want to give another warning. You've heard me give warnings in some of these lessons. A warning to those who are wanting to encourage those who are hopeless. So if you're one of the encouragers of hopeless people, this is an illustration I want to give to you. It's a warning that I want to give through this illustration. The illustration is an excerpt from a book entitled Door of Hope by Jan Frank. Jan Frank is a Christian counselor, a Christian psychologist. This illustration comes from her very first chapter in the book. The name of the chapter is Healing Emotional Wounds. The excerpt is on page 2, so it's right there at the beginning. So I'm going to read this to you, and it's as if she is writing this. Last week, my phone rang while I was preparing dinner. Jan? Came the troubled voice on the other end. Jan, this is Cora. I'm going to kill myself if I don't get some answers. So I whispered a quick prayer for guidance, and I asked, Cora, what happened? Cora responds, I don't know what to think anymore. I went to my minister for counseling today, and his first question to me was, why haven't you been in church? I explained to him that I'm having trouble relating to God because of my past, but that I'm currently in therapy, trying to work things out, and then he cuts me off, saying, you don't need therapy. You just start being obedient and get your life right with God. Jan then relates, as I listened to Cora, her voice became more desperate. Cora continues, Jan, when I tried to explain to him that being molested as a child had taken a toll on my life, on my marriage, on everything, he immediately corrected me. He said the problem was my rebelliousness and that I just needed to be submissive to my abusive husband and to quit going to therapy for the answers that only God provides. Cora then paused and then blurted out, Jan, I was so shook up after the session with him that I called a friend from church who had been my confidant in the past. And when I told her what our minister said, she fully supported him. And then she adds, if you don't get your life in shape, Cora, God's going to take away your little girl and your house. You'll live all alone for the rest of your life. Sobbing, Cora continued, Jan, if that's really who God is, then I might as well kill myself. And in Jan's book, she adds this right at the end of that illustration. Jan says, like many of us, Cora's view of God had been distorted by her experiences in life. So here's my warning. And again, this warning is to those of us who are trying to comfort the hopeless. Okay, the idea that therapy is of no value to a Christian is not true. God has given mankind the ability to study, to reason, to figure things out, etc. One doesn't have to be a Christian to make a scientific discovery. One doesn't have to be a Christian to create beautiful art. One doesn't have to be a Christian to help a fellow human being. So I want to make sure you understand, though, what is taught in this class, in this Unburdened series. First of all, there is some help that is definitely given through therapy. But our first premise, the very first premise here, is that the Bible is inspired of God, and it is profitable for teaching, reproof, correction, and instruction, that the man of God may be complete, furnished completely unto every good work, 2 Timothy 3. And our second premise is this, that God has granted us all things that pertain to life and godliness through a knowledge of his Son, 2 Peter 1, verse 3. You've heard me say this class is not a self-help book, because I don't believe that the answers are just all inside us, discoverable from within, avoid and depart apart from God. Okay, meaning the answers are with God. It's not something inside me that's just void of God where I can find the answers. That is why God provides man with his written word. Now, counseling, and I'm gonna kind of use the phrases and maybe to help you understand. Counseling meaning counseling that really doesn't have anything to do with God. It just has to do with all the cool things that man has figured out. Counseling from a perspective void of God may tell us some things that are inherently correct and are inherently true. But I will remind you, nothing is inherently correct or true without it having its origin from God. And it's true. God made our minds function in certain ways so that whether you believe in him or not, if you do this or you act like this is going to happen. This certain thing will happen. And without God in the picture of helping yourself, the problem there is you will be missing the master architect's wisdom and design. Basically, you're going to be depending on what man has discovered about God's wisdom if you don't go to counseling that incorporates the wisdom of God from Scripture. So there is value in just normal counseling that doesn't have anything to do with God. It's just the wisdom that God has allowed man to find out and to understand. There is some value in that. There is also value, in fact, I'm going to believe more value in making sure that your wisdom and your ideas of truth come alongside what God has said. So that if you're trying to find value for yourself, you don't just listen to what man has figured out as to what could make you valuable. I mean, listen to that, but don't only listen to that, and don't make that the top priority of where you get your value. Get your value on what God's word has said you are valuable and where you find your value. This class begins with the word of God as the divine standard and will strive to move us to accept certain basic truths in order to effectively unburden us from the problems that life throws our way. So the warning here to those wanting to give encouragement to the hopeless, phrases like, well, you just need to go to church. Or phrases like, don't do therapy, just believe in God, trust in him. Or the phrase, just start being obedient and get your life right with God. That's all you need to do. You know, those phrases may have some truth in them, but you have to think about context. You have to think about the context in which they're said. You have to think about the timing. You have to think about the tone. You have to think about how open the listener is to hearing some things. You know, it's true. The listener may need to get some things right with their life. But to say that's the only thing they need to do may be stretching the truth. So be attentive to the one that's hurting. Be attentive to the one that's hurting. One sentence fixes for hopelessness are doomed to fail on so many levels. Like I'll just throw out one phrase, just let go and let God. You know, that's a well-meaning phrase, but there is seldom, very seldom, a real place to actually use that phrase, especially if you're talking to someone that's dealing with hopelessness. So that's my warning. Let's continue on. So here are my attempts to help us understand the feeling of hopelessness. You've already gotten one illustration from the door of hope. Here's another one. So I wonder if you could just imagine with me for a little bit. Imagine yourself in a jungle, a dense, dark jungle. Your friends convinced you that it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, you know, for this trip, and here you are. You paid for your transportation to get there. You've crossed the ocean. You hired a guide. You join your group. You're on this trek through the jungle, and you're right into it. You're going where you've never been before, and you're into the thick, strange world of the jungle. Sound interesting, doesn't it? Yeah, maybe. Let's take a little bit further step. Imagine that you are in this jungle, but you're lost and you're alone. Maybe you pause to take off your boot and straighten out your sock because it was really bothering you. You know, your foot began hurting. And then by the time you were back up and ready to tramp through the jungle some more, you looked up and everybody was gone. Everybody was gone. Nobody's near you. And at this point, I want you to think of yourself in that situation. You realize there's nobody around. You're lost and you have no clue where you are. What are the first thoughts that pop into your head? What are the first feelings that begin to well up inside? Did you feel a little bit of panic? Do you feel some fear? Do you feel worried? Maybe you feel hopeful because surely they're not that far away. So what would you do? What would you do? Now, let me pause right there and start another illustration, and these two illustrations are going to kind of weave their way through this class. Now, I think right now I'm thinking of a time when Addison, my oldest, my son, well, he was in high school, and he was on his very first trip to Ukraine. We had just come into the country. We were in the city of Kyiv. There was a group of about 20 of us, and we had one interpreter. We had one interpreter for 20 of us in the big city, Kyiv. And now we're about to go on the metro, which is the subway. We are going down this amazing 6-story escalator. Crazy to describe it. Unbelievable. I mean, it was like we got on this escalator and we're like, I can't even see the bottom of this escalator. So we're going down deep into the underground of Kyiv. And then we get to the bottom there, and we are here at a super crowded subway platform. And the interpreter's instructions, okay, here's what she said. Everybody, you had better get on the train when the doors open. Everyone, make sure you get on. What we didn't realize was not only were there hundreds of people trying to get on this train, but there are hundreds of people trying to get off this train. And what also we didn't realize was that all of these hundreds and hundreds of people were going to push and shove like their life depended on them getting on this train. So the doors fly open and the frantic shoving match begins. And I personally was there, and so I start shoving and pushing and squeezing my way on, and I made it. I made it. And as the doors were closing, and as I had this sense of accomplishment, I made it onto the train, somebody goes, Scott, Addison didn't get on. And I'm like, what? Sure enough, as the doors are closed and as the train starts to begin to move, I see like deer in the headlights, this look from my teenage son who is still on the platform by himself as we leave bounding off to he knows not where. Now, I will say this. My son is a Boy Scout. So he's been trained to know exactly what to do when he's left alone in a super crowded metro station in a country where he doesn't speak the language and he has no cell phone, no way to communicate. He's a Boy Scout. He's been trained what to do. Boy Scouts of America, or maybe Trail Life Adventurers. Let me ask you guys, Boy Scouts, Trail Life Adventurers, what do you expect Addison to do at that very point? Yeah. Here's what he did. He stayed exactly where he was. He didn't try to find us. He let us find him. He stayed where he was. And what I mean by that is he went and sat on a bench right there where he was. So, maybe I'll conclude that a little bit later. Okay. So here you are, alone in the jungle. What do? Well, you stand there. Maybe after a little while, you sit there. You're all alone. And you've been all alone. Well, now you don't even know how long you've been all alone. Your watch, it was attached to your backpack that the nice guy who said, let me hold your backpack while you're changing your shoe, and he walked off with it. You didn't intend him to walk off with it, but he did. Now you're stuck here in the middle of nowhere and don't even know how long you've been there. So let me ask you, if you had been Addison, left on that metro, left on the, at that station, and you'd went and sat down on that bench, how long would you have waited there on the bench with nobody coming back? How long would it be until you would leave the bench and actually go search for your group? Would it be 1 hour? Would it be 2? Would it be 4? Would it be 6 hours? What if nobody came back in a day? How long would you have taken? How long would it be until you took things into your own hands to find your group? Okay, now I'm back in the jungle. What seems like hours have passed. The ebb of night has begun to creep its way down the trees, and you finally decide, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to take a chance. So you go to the right. Nothing. I mean, surely they went right? Nothing. In fact, you can't even find a trail. After a few hours and darkness has actually fallen, now you're wondering, maybe I should have went left. And there's no sign of a trail. How do you feel? Now you have a real problem. First of all, you weren't made for the jungle. You weren't made for this place. Drop you in the middle of boulevards and streets and avenues and cul-de-sacs, you could find your way home with a drop of a hat. You might even take the long way home just for fun. But here in this sky blocking foliage, here where there are trail hiding thickets, you're out of your element. Okay, you weren't made for the jungle. And you know what's worse? You're not equipped for the place. You don't have your backpack. You have no machete, you have no knife, you have no matches, no flares, no food. You are not equipped for this place. You have no clue how to get out. And there's nobody to ask. There's no one to ask for help. Does this sound like fun? No, it doesn't. So before moving on, let's just pause and ask, at that moment, how would you feel? Given such circumstances, what emotions would surface? What would you wrestle with in your head? And what I want to make sure we understand about hopelessness is almost like that second round of baggage, because we feel fear, we feel anxiety, we feel anger. And then as those feelings persist, as the situation that caused those feelings persist, and by persist, it may still be happening, or it may be happening over and over in our head because we've never worked anything out. But these are other emotions, and as they continue, they drag up the baggage, the burden of hopelessness. Do you feel fear while you're there in the jungle? Sure, of course, who wouldn't? Do you feel anxiety? Well, that makes sense too. Do you feel angry? I mean, how could they have just left you like that? I mean, at least the guy with the backpack should have cared, right? And by the way, what about the person who talked you into even coming on this trip? Where are they? And you can see that anger there, even in the sense that you've been passed by, you've been not thought of, you've been not cared for. And most of all, the fear, the anxiety, the anger can turn to hopelessness. You see, you have no idea where to turn. You have no hunch about what to do, no clues as to which direction they went. Well, you might know where they're going, but you have no clue which direction that is. You have no light to find your way. You have no one to ask. And who could blame you for just sitting down on that log or lying down in the underbrush, after you check for snakes first, okay? Who could blame you for just burying your face in your hands and thinking to yourself, so this is how it ends for me? And I know this is an illustration, but those words, so this is how it ends for me. I'll never get out of here. You have no direction. You have no equipment for this, and therefore you have no hope. Can you freeze that frame, that emotion for just a moment? Can you sense just for a second how it feels to be out of your element? Can you sense for a second how it feels to be literally out of solutions? Can you feel what it means to be out of ideas and out of energy to even try one if you had one? Can you imagine just for a moment how it feels to be hopeless, to be out of hope? If you can relate to many people in this world. For many people, life is like this jungle, okay? But it's really not a jungle with trees and beasts. If it were just that simple, right? Would that our jungles be able to be cut with the machete, right? But our adversaries, it's so much bigger than that. Our jungles are made up of, if I could use this word, thicker thickets. Okay, our jungles are made up of things like failing health, broken hearts, empty wallets, countless bad choice after bad choice, countless abuse after abuse. Our forests are framed with hospital walls and divorce courts, unopened bills, and countless shame after shame. We don't hear the birds in the trees. We hear the roaring of the lions, the endless complaints of neighbors and demanding bosses, the screaming of our mates, and the crying of our own children, and we are exhausted. It's a jungle out there. For some, even for many, hope is gone, or at least in short supply. And hopelessness is an odd burden. Unlike other burdens, hopelessness comes in this big, gigantic, compartment-filled piece of luggage, but it's absolutely empty. Okay, it's not just not very full, and it's not just a little bit full. It is completely empty. You can check every compartment. You can unzip everything. You can pull out every cubby hole, every drawer, every nook and cranny, totally empty. You can turn it upside down and you can shake it, and it's totally empty. The burden of hopelessness is painfully empty. And I know it's not a pretty picture. So let's try to brighten up our picture a little bit because I've just tried to help you figure out the feeling of emotion. We've imagined the emotions of being lost. Do you think you can do the same with imagining this being rescued? If we took all this time to imagine what it was like to be lost, can we imagine what it's like to be rescued? What would it take to restore hope to that person in the jungle? What would it take to restore hope to that Addison on the bench? What would it take to restore hope to Cora? The answers that come to my mind, first of all, the first hope would be recognized in a single person. Not just any person, We don't need somebody to show up in this jungle equally confused as we are. We need someone who knows the way out. And from him, we need some vision. We need someone to lift our spirits. We need someone to look us in the face and say, this isn't the end. Okay? This isn't the end. Don't give up. There's a better place than this log in this jungle. Addison, there's a better place than this bench in this crowded metro stop. And perhaps most importantly, this person needs to have direction that is brought to us. We need direction. This isn't the end. Don't give up. There's a better place, and I know the way where it is. I'll lead you there. I'll lead you there. If you only have a person, but no renewed vision, all you have is company. And I get it, misery loves company, but that doesn't solve the burden of hopelessness. If he has a vision, but he has no direction, then all you have is a dreamer for company. Does that make sense? But if you have the right person with direction who can take you from this place to the right place, then you have one who can restore hope. You can have one that can restore hope, or the way it said in Psalm 23, he restores my soul. Jesus Christ majors in restoring hope to the soul. Whether you are a lamb lost on a craggy ledge, or you're a city slicker lost in the jungle, or you're a teenager deep in the underground metro in a foreign country, everything changes when your rescuer appears. Your loneliness diminishes because you now have fellowship. You do have company. Your despair decreases because you have vision, and your confusion begins to lift because you have direction. And please note, you haven't left the jungle. You haven't left the jungle. You're still at that subway stop. You still have had the baggage of what has happened to you in your past. The trees still eclipse the sky. They still speak a foreign language that you don't understand. Animals still lurk in the bushes. People are still pushing and shoving. The jungle is still there. It hasn't changed, but you have. Okay, think about this. You have changed. Why? Because of this person. Because you have hope. And you have hope because you've met somebody who can lead you out. Jesus knows that you weren't meant for this place. He knows that you're not equipped for this place. So he's come to guide you out. He's come to restore your soul, and he's the perfect one to do so. Because our shepherd has the right vision. He reminds you, as foreigners and strangers in this world, this is 1 Peter 2:11, that there is a war being waged against your soul. If you were my daughter, I might even say it like this: sweetheart, we're foreigners and strangers in this land, and there is a war being waged against your soul. And Jesus urges us to lift our eyes from the jungle around us to the heaven above us. Colossians 3, verses 2, and I'm going to read it to you from the Message version. Colossians 3, verse 2 says this: don't shuffle along, eyes to the ground, absorbed with the things right in front of you. Look up. Look up and be alert to what's going on around Christ. See things from his perspective. So I love the way that's said. Look up and be alert to what's going on around Christ. So we're looking at Christ. We're looking toward him. And then it says, see things from his perspective. David said it this way in Psalm 121, verses 1 through 3, and then 5 through 7. David said it this way: I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Please don't let that slip by. The maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not burn you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. You see, our rescuer has the right vision and he has the right direction. He has made the boldest claim in history, in the history of the world, when he declared in John 14:6, I am the way. I am the way. You know, people wondered if the claim was accurate. He answered their questions by cutting a path through the underbrush of sin and death and escaping alive. He's the only one that's ever done that. He's the only one who can help you and me do the same. He is the only one who has defeated death with the power of the Father. He has the right vision. He has the right homeland. He's seen the homeland. He has the right direction. He's cut the path. But most of all, he's the right person because he is our God. He is our God. You know, who knows the jungle better than the one who made it? Who knows the pitfalls of the path better than the one who has walked the path? I'll give you another illustration. The story is told of a man who was on an African safari deep into the jungle. And the guide had a machete. And the guide was out in front whacking away all the tall weeds and all the thick underbrush. And the traveler was weary. The traveler was hot. And out of frustration, the traveler just said, where are we? Do you even know where we're going? Where are you taking me? Where is the path? And the seasoned guide just stopped and looked back at the man and replied, I am the path. You know, we ask the same questions, don't we? We ask God, God, where are you taking me? Where is the path? And he, like this guide, he may not tell us everything, but he gives us a hint or two. And if he did tell us, I'm not even sure, would we even understand, would we comprehend our location if God told us? But rather, he gives us Jesus. He gives us something far greater. He gives us himself. Does he remove the jungle? No. No, the vegetation is still pretty thick. Does he purge all the predators? Does he take all the lions and tigers away? No. Danger is still there. Jesus doesn't give hope by changing the jungle. He restores hope by giving himself. He's promised that he would stay with us till the very end. He's clearing our path. He's clearing our path. Hebrews 13, verse 5, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Matthew 28:20, I am with you always, even to the very end of the age. Now, some of you don't need it right now. Your jungle is a meadow. Your journey is a delight. And if you're in that case, congratulations, man. Enjoy that. But remember, we don't know what tomorrow holds. We do not know where this path will lead. You may be just one turn from a cemetery. You may just be one turn from a hospital bed, one bend in the road from an empty house, one curve away from the jungle, or maybe I should say one 6-story escalator ride from a crowded subway stop. And although you don't need your hope restored today, you may need it restored tomorrow. And you need to know to whom to turn. Some of you do need hope today. Some of you absolutely need hope today. And you know you're not made for this place. You need to know that you're not equipped for this place. You need an equipper. And you need to know that you've got to have somebody lead you out. So call out for your shepherd. Call out for your shepherd. He knows your voice. And he's just waiting for that request. Let's bow in prayer. Father, may you lift us up through your word. May we lift our eyes to you. May we fight that battle within ourselves to keep our eyes lowered, to keep it focused on the underbrush, the things that hem us in. And Father, may we understand that you are just a Bible away. You are just a prayer away. Father, you are just a church member away. Father, may we know the value that you give us. May we know that you have not left us alone, so that even when earthly people forsake us, our hope isn't dependent on people. Our hope is dependent on you, our solid rock, our foundation, our cleft in the rock, and that you have our best in mind. Father, if there is somebody that is in the depths of hopelessness right now, Father, may they understand and know they're not alone. May they renew their hope in you by listening to you, by looking to you. May they find the strength that you offer. May they find the way of the path that you are blazing for them. And may they know that you are with them. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for joining us this morning, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.